we should not be afraid to leverage these tools. But at the same time, we should be wary of its limitations. We should not be overly dependent. While yes, it's making us very efficient, very productive, let's still learn the fundamentals. Let's know the bounds of these technologies that we're using.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the AI Purity Podcast, your premier destination for exploring cutting-edge world of artificial intelligence. I'm your host, Patricia, and today we're thrilled to dive into the realm of data science and artificial intelligence with an industry leader whose journey embodies innovation and impact. With a master's in data science from the Asian Institute of Management, our guest has garnered accolades for exemplary work, including being awarded the top data scientist by ASEAN by the Center of Applied Data Science. He is currently serving as a data science and analytics lead, and our guest has a proven track record of leveraging data driven insights to drive innovation and impact. Join us as we delve into his journey, insights, and vision for the transformative power of artificial intelligence. Welcome to the podcast, Jude Michael Teves. Hi, Jude.
Hello, Patricia. Thank you for that
Hi.
introduction. Really appreciate it.
Of course, thank you. We are so glad to have you here today. We would love for you to introduce yourself a little bit to our audience. Please tell us how you got started in this industry and what made you want to become a data scientist and computer engineer.
Okay, that's a very long story. How did I get here? Well, I guess even back then, when I was still in my undergraduate years, I've been very much interested in science and technology. So I pursued a degree in computer science and computer engineering. And like most computer science and computer engineering people, they would eventually go that route, right? More
Mhm.
of like a software engineer. But even back then, when I was still about to start my software engineer career, I sort of had an existential crisis, I would say.
Wow.
More of like me trying to find what it is that I could do that could really benefit the humanity, and something, of course, that I'm really passionate about and should be aligned with with what I am studying when I was about to graduate. So I thought to myself that I think at that time it would be artificial intelligence, because I think it answers many of the things, so questions that we have, like what is intelligence? What if we get to a point wherein the singularity happens? All of those things. So I want to be part of that. That was my thinking back then. Before, I remember it was not even mandatory to take AI courses, machine learning courses. It's really a conscious decision on my end to really focus on AI. So I went that path. I still had my software engineering career actually. So after graduating, I was a software engineer, but on the side, I was studying lots of AI, and I eventually heard about data science. Because I mean, it's not technically the same, but there
Mhm.
are lots of overlaps, right? AI and data science, because in data science, we're applying artificial intelligence. And at that time, the Asian Institute of Management, where I took my master's, they're about to offer the first data science masters here in the country. So I was interested in that. I wanted to learn more. And yeah, I got fascinated, and eventually took that MS degree. Of course, I learned lots of AI in that course as well, but I eventually learned that TS is something that could really impact a lot of industries like AI. And at that time, it's starting to be hyped, not as hype as it is right now, but back then it's still starting. So yes, I was lucky to be one of the first movers in that
Mhm.
space. And eventually, of course, after that, I also got lucky that it eventually became hype, and got many opportunities. So after taking that MS degree, eventually got this role at ADB, the Asian Development Bank. Um, was part of the innovation there. So we started a lot of AI NLPDS projects in that organization. So my typical skill for that would be that before ChatGPT became a thing, that's one of the things that I was focusing on. So back in 2019, my main task at ADB is to create this text summarization model. And again, this is pre-ChatGPT. We're still using GPT-4. doing all of those things took a lot of time, lots of months for me to really read the research papers and try to implement them and make it work in the context of the bank, gathering so many data. We had many people annotate that, basically the typical data collection process, and eventually train that AI model. So we're still getting some gibberish results. And that was still normal back then. It's not even a long time ago. 2019 was, well, about 5 years ago now,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
5 years ago. But before, I mean, the development in this space, in NLP, in large language models and AI in general, it's so amazing because before it's common to see gibberish, but now, I mean, we have ChatGPT and lots of models now. So yeah, I was focusing on that and lots of NLP chatbot project. And after that, I went to AIA, it's insurance. So still in the financial sector. And on top of that, I was teaching part-time at DLSU. So after my master's, I started to teach part-time at DLSU, and I have been teaching ever since. Because it's something that I really wanted to do. I'm really passionate about teaching. Because even in my undergraduate years, I was tutoring for free. I've been tutoring math, programming, electronics, robotics. And I realized that, it's something that I really enjoy and I wanted to continue doing that. But in order for me to teach, I have to have a master's degree. So that's why
Mhm.
I had to take my master's for two reasons. One is I really wanted to go the academic route. I wanted to teach, but just part-time. And also that I think that could benefit my career, my corpo career. So those are the two main reasons why I took my MS. And anyway, so because of that, because of the MS degree, I now can teach. So I started to teach. I've been developing many of the programs at TLSU. I've been teaching data science ever since. Part of the co-founders, basically, or the pioneers of the data science program at TLSU. That's, I guess, the general story.
That's really fascinating, and I'd love to get to know more about like how AI is being integrated into finance industries. But I did want to talk about your time at Salle University. Tell us how you developed their curriculum, particularly in their data science programs and their AI and machine learning courses.
So we are offering many programs at the LSU about data science. So we have this thing we call minor in data science. It can be taken by any undergraduate degree. So I have students coming from, say, liberal arts,
Mhm.
law, chemistry, biology, CS, of course, statistics, math, IT, all those stuff. So it's a thing now. So they have this core degree that they have, but there's minor in data science, and they have to take lots of units for them to get the minor in data science degree. So that's one of the things that we're offering. We're also offering lots of diploma courses. So we actually started with that. We started to develop the curriculum for and the materials for the diploma courses. So basically, it's really catered to industry practitioners. Of course, they want to learn more about data science, AI. It's the new thing, and we have sort of you could think like it's a boot camp more or less. It's about 2 months, really crash course, so many topics, and they're going to learn the fundamentals of data science. So that's one of our flagship short courses or diploma courses. We also now have the Master of Science in Data Science at LSU. So yeah, those are the programs that we have, and I've been developing the curriculum and the materials ever since
Wow.
for
One
those
of those
programs.
machine learning courses, Data 103 that you were teaching, you cover a wide range of topics from
Mm,
traditional supervised
yeah.
machine learning techniques to cutting edge tools like ChatGPT and Midjourney. How do you balance introducing foundational concepts with exploring the latest advancements in AI?
Right. That's a very good question. It's actually tricky to balance what's new, what's modern, what's novel, and also the fundamental topics with the fundamentals at first. I have a bias towards really understanding the fundamentals. You really have to go through the calculus and your algebra, all of those things. At least you have a working knowledge that it's like this.
Mhm.
You know how to implement neural networks from scratch, linear regression, and all of those algorithms, a few of them. But to be fair, before Data 103, which is machine learning, there's like Data 100, Data 101, 102. Those are different subjects like Intro to Data Science, Data Viz, and Data Mining. I teach practically all of them, but generally I teach Data 102 and 103, Data Mining, Machine Learning. So even before machine learning, the students are sort of trained to my approach. So they really have to learn the fundamentals of the previous courses. So by the time that they get to Data 103, machine learning, they're more prepared. They have acquired enough foundation for them to really tackle the modern stuff. But still, again, I will tackle calculus and algebra, make sure that they know at least the most basic implementation of linear regression, neural network, all of those things. And after that, now we'll explore the modern applications of of data science and AI, as well as the industry nuances, because that's
Mhm.
something that I think most academics tend to forget, because I mean it's the setting that we're in, so it's mostly about the theory, the foundations, but how does it really be used out there? It's also one of the things that I add in my courses, because I'm also an industry practitioner. So I always mention that, okay, this is what I'm teaching. This is the ideal state of things in an ideal world. But in reality, sometimes this happens because this and that. That's the context. That's the industry. So there.
And with the advancements in AI and machine learning, how do you encourage students to stay curious and keep up with the rapidly evolving field beyond the confines of the classroom?
I really encourage my students to play around with the tools that are out there, because there's just so many things that are happening nowadays. And even me, I can't always be up to date with all of those advancements, all of those technologies. There's just so much. That's why I focus on the fundamentals. I show them a few applications, a few important tools, and then I leave it to them, let them explore. And I also learn from my students. I get to see that, okay, so there's this nice tool that could do this and that. But yeah, I really encourage my students to do that. So in one of my assessments, in one of my homework, I really make them use these technologies explicitly. Like, use this to summarize this research paper that I really like. So in one of my assessments, basically, I have a list of research papers that I want. I assign them to different groups. Use AI to explain it. Use AI to generate a slide. Use AI for everything, and then check the limitations of the AI approach. Because eventually they'll see that it's not perfect. Sometimes it's making up facts.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's the slide that was generated is wrong. So they will learn by using the tool.
And would you give the same advice because your students have you as a mentor to teach them real
Mhm.
life applications of these tools and to see how
Right.
AI doesn't necessarily do everything the same
Right.
way
Right.
human ability
Mhm.
can, you know? And for people who aren't your students, what would you say to them about, like, you know, AI is becoming more and more prominent? You said from 2019 to now 2024, the growth of AI has just been
Mhm.
to a lot. What would you say to these people who aren't your students?
We should not be afraid to leverage these tools, but at the same time, we should be wary of its limitations. We should not be overly dependent on these technologies. While yes, it's making us very efficient, very productive. Let's still learn the fundamentals. Let's know the bounds, the limitations of these technologies that we're using. So, in order to do that, you really have to just explore, test it, use it. You'll learn eventually that these are the things that you can and can't do. And if you have the time, I mean, not everyone has to take the technical route, but if you have the time, you could study the fundamentals. So you really get to know that, okay, these are the foundations. This is what we use to get to the modern applications like ChatGPT. And you'll have a better appreciation of what it can do and probably its limitations on a foundational level, because you are studying the fundamentals. But that's like an extra if you really wanted to go the technical route.
Yes, and I feel like this is a really important discussion. This is why here at AI Purity, we are a platform dedicated to AI text detection. I feel like it's really important for us
Mhm.
to discuss these limitations of AI and talk about, like, the ethical way to use it. And so I wanted to ask you, as an instructor and mentor, how do you perceive the current landscape of AI use among students? And what role do you think AI Purity platform, AI text detection tool can play in promoting responsible AI use in educational
Mhm.
settings?
These are uncertain times that we're in, I would say. While I'm very excited about all these developments, at the same time, this is uncharted territory. So even I don't know what's going to happen in the next couple of years. Generally, then I do encourage to use these technologies, but be mindful about the ethical implications of such. Like, let's not be very dependent on these things. Let's still apply our critical thinking, and I think these tools could help us, like AI Purity, in terms of these identifying the ones that are really AI generated or not. And with that, we're now applying that extra layer that we could use to at least lessen the noise that we have over the internet, because right now there's just so much AI generated content, and at least there's that one more thing that we could use to at least remove all of these, I would say, scatters that we
Mhm,
have in terms of the content, which could really make it hard for people to consume more content, because you never know what is real, what is not. At
mhm.
least we're helping in that aspect of things.
Can you share some specific instances from your teaching experiences where you've witnessed the impact of AI on student learning, and how do you navigate the ethical considerations that may arise?
Well, generally speaking, I would say that there's definitely an increase in productivity because it's still an additional data point that the students could use for them to learn instead of just relying on say books or me. Maybe there's another way of saying it that could help the students. Because I mean, we all have different ways of learning. Maybe the specific explanation, the specific analogy works for you, but doesn't work with other person. But at least with AI, with these tools, you could just keep on asking until you get that certain explanation that you want to hear, so that you could better digest the new information that you're trying to. And I've seen many of that in a lot of my students. But again, because I really encourage them to validate what they're learning, check the sources, make sure that what the AI is spitting out is real. And at least there's that perspective so that they don't really just rely on what it is saying.
That's really great. And I totally agree. Students, not just students, everyone on the internet right now should be practicing discernment with any types of content they consume online, because you're not really sure if it's like created by a
Mhm,
human or it's AI generated. But considering your background in machine learning and AI, how do you integrate these technologies
mhm.
into your computer science and data science courses to better prepare your students for the evolving job market?
Well, aside from the use of generative AI tools, in my case, it's really at the core of what I've been teaching. Say, for example, the data science minor. At the end of it, the finale would be machine learning. So, like by default, I have to teach machine learning, and I mean, machine learning is being used a lot in the data science field. So it's just one additional tools that we could use to extract insights from the data that we have. So how do I integrate it? Well, basically, for like the whole data science minor and even other programs that we have been offering, really emphasize the use of these modern tools like machine learning, so that we could get better insights from data aside from the traditional analytical methods.
I mean, with the prominence of AI tools right now, a lot of people are really scared of, maybe losing their jobs. There's been a lot of talk about that. In your opinion, what are the key skills and knowledge areas that students can focus on to excel in the rapidly evolving field of AI?
Okay, so well, definitely the first thing would be critical thinking. In this age where there's just so much information out there, and you never know which one is real or not, you need to have that critical thinking to determine whether it is fake or not. And I guess on top of that, I really encourage my students to, well, in the context of this course that I have, right, for them to really develop their foundations. Well, yeah, I mean, they could just make use of the tools and just apply it to whatever. At some point, I would say you'll get tired with just catching up with the newest trends, all of these technologies. You need to have a stable foundation. You need to have a core. And if you know the fundamentals, like really knowing the math, not, I mean, the hardware level math, but at least enough for you to be able to understand how these models work. At least, you have implemented some, you've seen it in action, maybe try to implement a few modules, even the basic ones, something that you could use whatever happens. There's this new technology, you know that you understood it well enough, at least a foundation. So I've been applying the same thing for many years now. I've seen many developments in the field. I've seen all these new architectures and whatnot in AI, but at the end of the day, it's still the same core algorithm. I know I'm trying to reduce it. This is the reductionism approach, but yes, there's still that core, and it's still the same. For example, the back propagation algorithm, it's still the core of neural network of all these models that we're using. If you understand that, then at least can withstand all these changes, more or less, more
Mhm.
or less.
And how can students and educational institutions better prepare students for the integration of AI in their future careers?
I would suggest for schools to really encourage the use of these tools, not for them not to be overly wary of such things. Yes, of course, we should still be cautious, but at the same time, let them know about its limitations by actually using it. Even the faculty, I really encourage my co-faculty to make use of these tools so that we all know together what it can and cannot do. Again, it's still a relatively new tool. It was just released at the end of 2022. Yeah, it was 2022. November 2022. ChatGPT. And then I would say up until now, we still haven't fully understood it. So by making use of these tools, we will know better as a species, as humanity. We'll know the extent of what we can and cannot do.
And given the newness of the industry, how do you approach teaching students about the ethical considerations surrounding AI?
It's a very hard topic. How to discuss the ethical considerations of such. I would say the what initially happened when these tools were released is that it was met with some resistance. They
Mhm.
generally lots of resistance. My approach was different. I mean, I'm not saying that this is the best thing, but I guess it worked for me. I embraced it initially. Okay, but my thinking is sort of like, if you can't beat them, join them. Something
Mhm.
along those lines, actually. So I don't really understand the tool back then. I'm not sure about what it can do, as I've been saying. So okay, well, let's explore this together. Let's see. Encourage me to just use this while ensuring that I keep on mentioning that these are the limitations, whatnot. But maybe I'm wrong. Let's just see. Let's just use. Maybe it's now performing better than expected. So by doing such, and I've been doing this for the past couple of terms, more than a year now. I've seen different ways for my students to leverage these tools. I've seen different approaches on how they could use the AI to explain all these topics that I've been teaching. So that has been my approach because even me, I don't know the full extent of these technology.
That's a great way to see it. If you can't beat them, join them, especially when using these
Yes.
types of AI tools. But how do you envision the future of education? How do you think AI will be impacting education in terms of the curriculum development and teaching methodologies?
What I foresee is that we'll focus more on the applications, the edge cases, the nuances of these things that we're teaching instead of the typical, I mean, the typical school setting, I would say. It's just the foundations. I mean, that's still important, but we could now focus on other things because it has been done for so many times, and there are these tools that could help us learn this new topic. So as educators, we could now focus on other things, and that's what I am trying to do right now. So I still have my typical lecture sessions, but I augment it with there's this existing course out there. If you're gonna learn programming, might as well just use this data camp for the typical syntax. That's something that has been taught a lot already. There's just so many resources out there, thousands even, and it's for free. Why do I have to keep on repeating the same thing? What I will be teaching are the things that are not on the internet,
Mhm.
the context, the nuance. Okay, yes, this is the foundation. Yes, we use this model, this algorithm, this pre-processing technique, but how is it really being used out there? Those things. So I
Mhm.
think we could now focus on those things, the higher level things, instead of the fundamental ones.
And as you teach these courses on computer science, data science courses, what challenges have you seen or observed amongst your students in facing and understanding and applying AI concepts?
Hmm. There's so many facets. Um, in learning AI, the challenges generally, I would say, in the courses that I teach, it would be the diversity of background. Let's start with that first. Because in the courses that I teach, the students come from all sorts of backgrounds. Again,
Mhm.
some of them are coming, say, from liberal arts, law, like courses that are very far from STEM, right? So
Mhm.
with the course that I teach, that's the first hurdle that I encounter. How do I teach this very technical course to a very diverse audience? Of course, there's going to be some compromises, right? But again, well, to be fair, there have been multiple courses leading up to the machine learning course that I have. So that's the first thing. Of course, I really have to be, I guess, creative as an educator to at least pull that off given the diversity of the audience. But assuming they now have enough fundamentals, like, okay, they've learned the calculus and the algebra, statistics, programming side of things. Actually, that's the next problem. Learning all these concepts and integrating them together. Say, for example, you might be an IT person. You're very good at programming, but you might have some math and stat courses, but you're not proficient in it. Same goes for the other stat people. They're proficient in this kind of topic, but you now need this. So in the field of DSM, it's the intersection of all these topics, and that makes it tricky for a lot of my students to grasp. Like they could probably understand each of the topics alone in silo, but how do you now synergize? How do you integrate all of those things, combine all those learnings that we've had, and apply them? That's another thing. And you really just have to keep on practicing, see the different use cases for those topics and how they're being utilized together. That's really it. So those are the typical hurdle that my students are facing. Let's just say that okay, now they can build the models. They can now like do some machine learning because they've been doing that for a couple of months or a year or two in my BS minor. The next problem would be the application, the industry perspective. Well, like yes, they can now create a pipeline, they can like do train and predict models, but is it really necessary to like train a model? Maybe for this problem, we don't even need to train a model to begin with. It's a simple, I don't know, say correlation. Maybe that could already answer the business problem. That's something that again they could learn by experiencing many things. That's not something that could like easily get by reading books.
Mhm.
So yeah, those are the typical hurdles. And yeah, they just need a lot of time for that. That's normal. That's why I'm there as their mentor, as their prof, to really guide them. So yeah, I've been teaching the fundamentals, but we will also discuss those nuances. Like, would you sacrifice accuracy versus runtime? It depends on the context. Maybe in this context, accuracy is very important. It doesn't matter if it like takes days or even weeks. I mean, that's absurd, right? But doesn't matter if it takes that long, if it will save a life, within the context of health. I don't care if it like, takes another day or two, but that 1% increase in accuracy means a lot because that's a life being saved,
Mhm.
right? So it really depends on the context. Like, what if we think of the context of self-driving cars? Maybe this model is very accurate, could detect if this is a person 100%, but it takes like, I don't know, a day for it to process. Of course, you're going to hit that person already. It has to be
Mhm.
fast while not, sacrificing the accuracy that much. So again, context is important. You have to know context. Don't just blindly apply some model because this has the best accuracy. You have to know what it's for. It really depends on the industry, depends on the application.
And in your experience, what are some common misconceptions or myths about AI that students often have, and how do you address them?
Like it's magic. I mean, of course, if you haven't taken any of my courses, most people would just think that it's like magic. It's something that they can't do. It's too advanced. Well, yeah, it can be advanced, but if you break it down properly, you could understand it. You could demystify a lot of the things. But of course, with the more recent models, it's just too complicated for us to understand because, again, like the recent models have billions of parameters. But if we start with the more explainable models, then yeah, it's not black box. It really explain why this is the output. I believe that everything is deterministic if, again, we have enough computational power to process that information. It really determine why this is the output. But there's just so many combinations. That's why it's hard for us to identify why this is the final output. Again, because of the billions of interactions, the nodes in the models that we have right now. But if you think of a simple model, very clear. This is the output because of this rule and this mathematical equation, whatnot. Yeah.
Now, I want to pivot a little bit away from the educational setting, and I wanted to ask you a little bit more about other industries, especially since you work in the finance banking industry. In
Mhm.
your role as a data science and analytics lead, how do you foresee AI changing the professional landscape in finance, for example, especially in areas like credit scoring? And what are the ethical
Mhm.
considerations that may come to play in that domain?
Yeah, very good question. Generally, in this sector, we have a preference towards explainability. Well, yes, these models are something that we could use. Um, we generally don't recommend the use of such just because it is really important for us to explain every single thing. Like in the context of credit scoring, would you want me to say to you that you have been rejected because the AI model said so? That's something that most people can accept, right? It has to be clear because this feature, blah, blah, blah. This is the effect on your score, very clear. But in certain applications, yes, we could definitely make use of these advanced models, but for the most part, we are very cautious. And also because that's mandated by law, we really just have to explain why we're giving you this score, for example. But say for cases that are more on the cognitive AI side, like for example, face recognition, those kinds of things. Definitely, you have to make use of advanced models, advanced neural network models for that. But others, it has to be very explainable.
And as a consultant in machine learning and AI, what challenges do you often encounter in developing end-to-end applications, and how do you address them?
Mm. Well, it depends on the organization that I'm working with, but the general problems in deploying end-to-end applications would be, of course, where to get the data from. That's really the first problem in BS. While we have been hearing about all these use cases and whatnot, but in reality, it's hard to pull it off. It's hard to even like, start a proper project just because the data is not there, or maybe there are data restriction issues for various reasons, maybe data privacy, related matters, the data collection in general, the different data formats out there. Like, yes, there's data, but you'd expect that there's still the data is still on some paper out there. It's not digitized. So that's typically one of the problems. Yeah, the data exists, but not digital.
Mhm.
So typical problems.
And how do you foresee AI impacting the future of finance and banking? And what potential challenges should industry professionals be prepared to address this?
Well, I'm not speaking on behalf of any financial institution. Just want
Mhm.
to be safe.
Yeah.
But I think, my opinion, one thing that it could really impact would be the customer experience. Well, that's a given, I think, because of all these tools that are available to us that are very modern, that sometimes feel very human-like. We will have a better customer experience. Say, for example, we have a chatbot you're talking to, and you overall you'll have a better experience instead of like your typical chat response, which are very limited. So, the onboarding process could be more seamless, could be more smooth. Generally, I think that's one big impact of AI technology in the financial sector. Also, would say something like voice bots, something like that. Yeah, because they actually feel very human-like now. Like, well, when you listen to them, right? When you listen to those AI voices, I sometimes think that they are like real human in some cases. So basically, better customer experience overall. Another thing from a more, I guess, more technical side of things, the fraud.
Mhm.
With better AI tools, we could have better predictions on the risks and the fraud. But again, the explainability factor is another thing. But anyway, if you could catch those outliers, that means a lot. Means a lot. So I think that's one of the things that AI could really help in this particular industry.
And can you discuss a specific project or initiative where you implemented machine learning or AI applications, and what impact did it have on that industry or organization you were working with?
One is an ADB. Again, I'm part of the innovation division many years ago. So we started many of these cool projects, cool use cases, and one of which is the one that I've mentioned earlier, wherein we're creating this model that could do text summarization. And generally, I mean, pre-chat GPT days, that's very rare. That is one of the hardest, if not the hardest, tasks in AI and natural language processing in general. Basically, creating text, summarizing text. Now it's very common with ChatGPT, but again, it wasn't that good before, especially in Asian development. Now, that really means a lot because we're really developing something and we're really proud of it because it took lots of months, but we're able to create something that could Somerset Tech. So what is it for? Basically, in ADB, we have so many projects across Asia, funding lots of large scale infra projects. And at the end of those projects, we have this thing called the independent evaluation reports. So basically, it's like an assessment of what went right, what went wrong, what could be improved, those things, right? So it's a long report, lots of pages, like about hundreds of pages in each of the projects. And we basically got many projects from ADB, got those PDFs, extracted the data, and then we had help from many of the people in ADB to annotate that. So it now for the specific, say, PDF or paragraph or text data, this is the output. So lots of manual work involved. But anyway, we're able to have a good corpus of data that we could use to train our model on. And with that, we're able to create an NLP model, a large language model back then that could summarize this ADB themes instead of you spending hours reading those PDF
Hmm.
papers. So it
And
basically helps everyone save a lot of time, right?
yeah,
Instead of you spending hours.
that
Just
would be
read the
very
summary.
impactful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to pivot back to ethical considerations and AI integration, especially in education. What do you think are the guidelines or best practices that should be in place for the responsible student engagement with AI technologies, particularly with tools like AI Purity, especially since we were talking about ChatGPT earlier? I feel like that's been one of the biggest things, like students using tools
Yeah,
like that
yeah.
to, create their work. So,
Guidelines. In my classes, what I do is, well, yes, I encourage them, but make sure you add references. You add notes, and because of the help of ChatGPT, this is the certain prompt, I got this output. Like it's okay for you to use these technologies, but just be honest. I think that's really important thing. I just want honesty from my students. At least they know, or I know that they use this tool for this thing, and they were able to answer that because of that.
and can you share instances where ethical considerations in AI projects presented challenges during your consultancy work? And how did you navigate these challenges?
I guess the typical ethical consideration in general when I do any AI or ML related projects would be the use of personally identifiable information. That's very important. So what is that? Basically, any information that you could use to identify a person. And in general, we avoid such because it might well induce some bias. Of course, like cannot include, say, for example, race or gender or other similar features in your models. So that's something that I'm really emphasizing when we do any of the projects that we have. So in the context of my class, if there's something like that, I tell them that that we can't use that, remove that, try to find another feature that could explain whatever it is that we're trying to predict.
And what would you say are the paramount ethical considerations that professionals in the AI and science field should prioritize? And how can they actively address these considerations in their work?
I would say it's the same thing. Still the use of personally identifiable information. It's really a big no-no for me to use those things. So the same applies in the context of corpo or industry.
I wanted to talk about the recent award that you were given, being a top data scientist in ASEAN. What insights can you share about the current state of AI adoption and innovation in the region?
In the region? Well, definitely there's a lot of adoption since ChatGPT was released. What I'm pretty sure we've been hearing about AI in the past couple of years, but a lot of the people out there are not very interested in that. But with the advent of ChatGPT and start of 2023, they call that the year of generative AI. Everyone's interested. Like even my grandparents, they're asking like, what does it do? They've been using the tools and whatnot. There's really a lot of adoption because everyone's talking about it. It's not one of the most. It is the most downloaded application. I was able to be even the top social media platforms. Like in the first couple of months, there have been so many users of ChatGPT. So definitely we can clearly say that there's a lot of adoption in the field of AI, not just in the Western world, but also in Asia, in the ASEAN region.
And as a data science ambassador for the ASEAN Foundation, what initiatives are you involved in to promote awareness and education about AI in the region?
as part of me being an ambassador for the ASEAN Foundation, as a data science ambassador, I've been conducting many data science sessions. So it's specifically for the Data Science Explorers competition. While I do some upskilling about data science, analytics, and cloud, they could also utilize that knowledge to compete in that specific competition where they could win thousands of dollars. So I've been doing that last year. I had many sessions, both on-site and off-site, mostly held at DLSU, Salle University, because I mean, that's my alma mater. Had many of my on-site sessions there. But I also had lots of participants from other ASEAN countries, such as Vietnam, Thailand, Singapore, Indonesia, that had hundreds of participants. And even if like I'm not doing it for the ASEAN Foundation, again, I'm an educator to begin with, so I still do teach it, in my classes and many other engagements that I had here in the country. I've been active in the community, so it's not just for ASEAN Foundation. It's not just for DLSU. I had lots of speaking engagements like for Google, for one of the regions here, had like thousands of people, thousands of students attending my talks in person. That's what I do, I guess, as an ambassador. I really promote the use of data science and AI, responsible use of those.
And what role do you see AI playing in skill development and continuous learning, both for students and professionals?
Just keep on asking the questions until you get what you want. Try to be more productive with the use of technologies. Yeah, that's really what I see it for.
And I wanted to ask you some advice, or since you are a mentor, and just general future directions for AI in education and other industries. In your role as a mentor, what advice do you give to your students and professionals entering the AI and data science field to navigate ethical challenges effectively?
Right question. General advice. Well, I have given so many advices, but what's the most general one that I give? Really depends on the context for the most part. But one of the things that I often say is, you have to learn the fundamentals, all those things, as I've been mentioning earlier. But I guess at the end of the day, what I would like to impart to most people is that don't forget to be human. Sounds cliche, right?
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, what are we using these tools for? Why are we doing all of these things? It's for us. It's for the betterment of our race, of us, for us humans, right? So just have that in mind in whatever it is that you do, whatever it is that you develop for the end users, us. That's gonna be your North Star. It will guide us in whatever it is that we do. Don't forget to be a human.
That's beautifully put. That's one of our core beliefs here at AI Purity actually. Purifying, the AI, keeping things human. That's really great. Thank you for
Mhm.
sharing that. And how do you see the field of machine learning education evolving in the coming years? What trends or advancements are you anticipating?
I'm looking forward to more developments in the reinforcement learning space. There are three areas in machine learning. For the most part, we have been focusing too much on supervised learning because that is the easiest. Next is unsupervised learning, but there's the reinforcement learning. And I think a lot of the developments that we could still do will definitely be in that space. So I am looking forward to that. So what are some typical examples of reinforcement learning? Like the AI models that they use for Dota 2, for example, it was able to be like the best Dota player. Same for the game of Go. Basically, those games, the AI that they use for that, that's reinforcement learning related. So I'm really looking forward to that. Haven't really done much work on that personally. I did like a few examples, but that's not something that I am actively working on. So yeah, really looking forward to that. And I also want to do more research on that space eventually. Maybe if I do my PhD once I start it, maybe I'll do reinforcement learning. But yeah,
And with the continuous evolution of AI technologies, what are your hopes and concerns regarding their impact on education and society as a whole?
I'm generally an optimist. So I'm hoping for the best. I'm hoping that we use it as a means to ascend, basically be more productive. But of course, we have to be mindful of the bad players out there. We have to put some policy, some rules in place so that it cannot be abused. I'm still looking forward to see it being used in a positive manner, but yeah, there has to be that. There has to be some rules. There has to be some checks in place,
Mhm.
just in case there will be some bad actors. You never
Mhm.
know.
I agree. And this is why we, have these discussions with a lot of
Mhm.
professionals across different industries, because I truly believe that with enough discussions, we can, really promote the ethical use of these technologies because
Mhm.
I don't believe they're going away. They're becoming more and more
Right,
prominent in
right, right.
society. So this is really important. And I wanted to ask you just quickly before you go, has there been any regulation so far in De La Salle University, for example, about the use of AI among students?
Yes, I would say for the most part. For example, in one of the courses I teach, it is explicit there that in the syllabus that they cannot use AI for these projects or these assessments unless we explicitly say so. So at least that's there for a lot of my assessments. Well, it depends on what it is, but generally I would encourage use of that if I am confident enough that it's something that they cannot easily search on the internet. I tend to give very hard assessments that I'm generally confident that you can ask AI, you can ask ChatGPT, and a lot of the times it cannot answer. I actually like that because at least they know that they can fully rely on AI.
Oh, that's great.
That's a good lesson already.
Yeah.
Try to use that. Up to you, but don't expect that it will be a right answer.
hmm And I don't want to take too much of your time. I just wanted to ask you what does the future hold for you? Do you have any other plans? What's the future of you and AI machine learning in your career at least?
Well, maybe eventually again in the future, I'll continue with my PhD. So if that's the case, then definitely there's going to be more AI research work for me. But if that's not going to be the route that I'll be taking, then that's practically what I do every day. Like I do a lot of ML AI in the different engagements that I have with the government, with the industry, and with the academia. So yeah, still lots of AI, but I guess I wanted to explore more. Maybe, as I mentioned earlier, like study more RL, reinforcement learning, try to see the the limits of that particular sub area in AI. I still don't know a lot, and but that's okay. That makes it fun. Gonna learn a
And
lot of things.
and you are an expert in machine learning, AI, data science. Is there any advice, anything you'd like to say to our audience today, just to impart on them?
Find your passion. Find your calling in life. Can be hard, but it's gonna be worth it. But at the same time, know what's relevant out there. So I always think about ikigai. If you're familiar with that concept, ikigai, you
It's
know
a
that.
Japanese
So
concept, yes.
yeah, the Japanese concept. I forgot it verbatim, but basically find that thing that is in the intersection of what you're good at, what the world needs, what you can get paid for. I think there's one more thing I think I forgot, but generally get idea. So
Mhm.
those things. And hopefully it aligns. I mean, you're listening to this podcast, so I'm hoping that it's something AI or ML related. But if it's not your thing, then that's okay. Find whatever it is. Hopefully you'll find that soon. If not, just give it time. I guess in my case, I got lucky that I got into this field, and luckily this is what the world needs. So yeah, I'm passionate about doing AI and all stuff. Eventually, it became hype.
Yeah, you were a very visionary person.
Yeah.
Because who would have like envisioned, AI being such a huge part in our lives today? So
Mhm.
that's really great foresight on your part there.
Mhm.
So we want to
Thank you for
thank
that.
you. We want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us in an episode of the AI Beauty Podcast. We really appreciate you.
Mhm.
And anything else you'd like to say before we end the episode?
None. I enjoyed this. Hopefully we can have more collaborations in the future, and I'm looking forward to this tool that you have created. So really excited for you guys.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. And of course, thank you to everyone who's listening today, and for joining us on another enlightening episode of the AI Purity Podcast. We hope you enjoyed uncovering the mysteries of AI generated text and the cutting edge solutions offered by AI Purity. Stay tuned for more in depth discussions and inclusive insights into the world of artificial intelligence, text analysis, and beyond. Don't forget to visit our website, www.ai-purity.com, and share this podcast to spread the word about the remarkable possibilities that AI Purity offers. Until next time, keep exploring, keep innovating, and keep unmasking the AI.